Welcome to the Ang&Geno show, where we talk about ways for you to grow your life and your business. How you doing, Ange?
I'm good, Gino. How are you today?
Good. So have you heard the book 0 to 1?
No, I haven't. Tell me about it.
Well, I can just tell you what I know about it.
Okay. I'm all ears.
I haven't finished it. It's a tech guy. In fact, he was part of PayPal. So anyway, he has some there's some good observations. I think they mainly focus on tech. They don't apply to, I think, the businesses you and I work with primarily. However, there's something said in there that I believe totally totally agrees with what we do. And that is, he said, so first of all, most businesses, it's about becoming more efficient, right? Automation, all this AI, they want to make, the business fully automated. He said he feels that the companies that are going to have the biggest impact in the future are the ones that empower people
Mm.
instead of,
Mm.
removing people.
Yeah.
And
So
I thought that is very accurate. Now, maybe in robotics, manufacturing, of course, that automation
yeah.
will outperform a person, but not in a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, and
service, especially a service industry,
service.
right?
Yeah.
You got
The
McDonald's now. The
service
service is
interface
you go order at that computer on the wall.
and your food
Like,
comes out in a box.
yeah, I don't.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
I don't go to
interesting.
McDonald's, but
Yeah, I don't either, fortunately. But if we're ever on the road and you need that burger and coffee, what's open and what's
yeah,
safe and what's got the predictable bathroom food combo? That's usually McDonald's. That's right.
exactly.
The most popular pit stop on the road. You know, you and I have talked a lot about AI, so I am keen to hear more about what he's written in this book because, I think having a robotic arm move a pallet from one side to the other, I think, I have a lot of my clients struggle with forklift safety in their organizations. And so those are places where, I think when you increase decrease injury, increase safety, that's a great place. But you're right. I mean, there needs to be a place where we increase something good in the world. And the hard part is, how do we get businesses to look at more than the bottom line? I think publicly traded companies run on a different circulatory system. The work I've done, I've seen, not all, Gino, but a lot of the work, great work I've done in publicly traded companies, I've seen it torn apart because a company had to do things to make their number.
Yeah.
And they will, you know, sell something of their own. I won't say to sell their mother down the river, but like I've seen companies, not all of them, but enough of them that it's heartbreaking. And I'm the consultant. I can only imagine how the people that are putting their daily effort into a big company watch that stock price be met regardless of what it did to a company. So I think big companies are going to be harder to sell on the magic of customer service. I changed credit cards because of the customer service. One card I had, amazing benefits. Like, I've given up benefits, but every time I called, I would talk to people speaking English, but I couldn't understand what they were saying. So they were reading from scripts. They couldn't solve problems. And I went back to, I'll tell you the card I did go back to. I kept it, but I started is Citibank. You call, you get that first line person, they solve the problem. You don't have to escalate the call twice to get someone capable or empowered to make a decision. So I think you're right. I think there's this magic of providing customer service, helping people. And I think that if AI can reduce some of the menial labor, but bring up the meaningful labor, and this is where I always have great hopes for privately owned companies. You and I've talked about how much we love our 80% of the country runs on privately held businesses.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just saw one of those little mini docs on the Utopia Bagel Company in New York. and they show how
Hmm.
they make bagels. And the owner, literally with a catch in his throat, says, "We're proud to make the best bagels in New York because everybody here makes our bagels with heart." And his voice cracks. He says, "Every one of our employees," like he introduces his employees, 18 years here, 14 years, like, you know, he's the only two guys that know how to twist bagels just like this. And then they literally have a line 8 hours a day at their store,
Wow.
right? They're building culture, they're building customer service, and so you can tell you just hit a whole nerve with me on my hopes, right? That we elevate and don't denigrate the human spirit.
Well, let's talk about something you've said in a previous podcast that you shared a statistic that the um, some group studies happiness level or something. You said it was always the geriatric group that was depressed or the saddest,
Mm-mm.
but now it's the 18 to 20, early 20s or something.
Yeah. 18 to
They're,
24 year
they're
olds.
not connected. They're lonely. It's such a, which I visualize like when I was a kid, we were all outside in the streets. I mean, we got neighbor, our kids have kids that went to go to school with on the
Yeah.
same street and they don't like go over and they never talk to each other. It's, you
Yeah.
know, just such a different world today. And
Even think about how we buy things, Gino. Even in those days, an 18 to 24-year-old couldn't wait to take part of their allowance or their paycheck or something they'd earned and go to the record store and buy a record in person.
yeah,
Talk to people about the music. Oh, what's a good album? Oh, we're playing that right now. Or go to Best Buy and look at the stereos, touch them, feel, now we're streaming music and this, and then we read the reviews online, we buy based on, like, it's wonderful to have information, but we're losing something. And the 18 to 24-year-olds who are raised on this convenience, you're right. You're right. It is sad. So, but I'll let you keep going because I know you're working your way to something here.
yeah. Well, so I'm just talking about in the world of business, when you talk about automation, automation is exacerbating that issue.
Mm-hmm.
What about the personal connection? And now there's extreme introverts that they don't want to talk to anybody. They love that that world probably. Um, but then there's the other half of us that don't. I'd rather talk to somebody. I'd rather have that, you know,
Yeah.
connection.
It's, so here I think is how humans have evolved. Before work life took over, humans raised their own food, raised their own animals, lived in small communities. So where they lived was their community. Then you'd have a layer for those who had organized religion, that the church was a community. Church, I call it a church. It could be in any country how you worship, right? But there was a form of community around worship. Let's just call it that. And that was an important community. And then life becomes more modern. We used to have work and neighborliness, right? Now I work with people and I ask people, who in your neighborhood has the key to your house? They're like, nobody has the key to my house in my neighborhood. I'm like, wow, okay, that's the litmus test for, are you close to your neighbors? You may have a friend over in Paris who you could walk up and go knock on their door and they'll take you in, but like, who's here to help you right now? So technology keeps you friends with that friend in Paris, but so a lot of us have lost any form of worship, right? Because I don't know why. That's a philosophy class on why. But we're losing worship, number one. So that's one community gone. We've lost our community of where we live. That's gone. So work has become the last vestigial community, which is why culture is so important.
And that got
If
damaged during COVID.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. You got it. Exactly. And that's why this remote recovery, it's like, mental health. I can't tell you how hard I'm getting recruited to be pulled back in by, counseling services they need clinical psych. There are not enough mental health providers. I'm getting Indeed up to here because I'm a trained clinical psychologist at heart to go run, different departments of psychologists for mental health. So You want to go big business? That's where there's a lot of work because people are really struggling, Gino. If AI kills the last of what's corporate, where it's our corporate, I don't have to call it corporate, our work community, right? We as humans need to determine, rebuild another community. Now, necessity has always forced humans to do things. You know, life used to be slow, so slow that you had time to think on your walk to go get your animals to bring them into the barn. You had time to meditate and think. Now we have to carve out time to meditate. We have to carve out time to walk. Whereas exercise was a part of how you survived. So, you know, we're not very good at humans at making something happen unless there's a necessity. So we have to figure out, how do we find that new layer of community that's not remote, because we know there's energy flow between people. Until we have an MRI machine that holds two people, we're not going to be able to measure that. But there is energy. There's energy in the words that we say. Have you seen that? There's a Japanese, he's a photographer slash scientist, where he freezes water after people have communicated emotions into the water. It's amazing. Like, he has people expressing anger, and then he freezes the water because, you know, and the photographs of people expressing anger versus love, if you see what it does to the water as it's frozen, you don't have to understand it. You just need to see it. Even if you look at it as an art form, you will see what anger looks like frozen in
Interesting.
water. It's fascinating. There's an entire book of his photographs, because water freezes kind of like a snowflake, you know, very uniquely every time. And it's consistent. So it's just a way, not just, it's a powerful way that we can start to unravel the mystery of the universe. You know, Deepak Chopra wrote a book called Quantum Health, something like 15 years ago, and they practically drove him out of the medical community. Well, they now figured out, oh, he's right. Because now the science figured it out. More people are kind of looking left instead of following left, you know, like zigging instead of zagging, right? Leaving what common knowledge in medicine says. And so here comes Deepak Chopra, like, oh, he said that 13 years ago in his book, Quantum Health. And, you know, so we know that there's energy. Breath work is a massive topic right now, Gino. I listened to a guy. I'm horrible with names, so I can't tell you the name, but there's a book out. We'll talk about it in a future podcast. The healing ability of breathing, number one. It talks about these, you know, sealed hotel rooms that are just like really like CO2 bombs for us. That, you know, carbon dioxide creates a lot of poor health, and by not breathing properly, or by being in poorly ventilated rooms without fresh air. Talks about, you know, 30 studies showing kids test scores go down by 50% in a room with 1,000, is it parts per million carbon dioxide? I can't remember the exact numbers, but
Wow.
there's some staggering results. So I've gone way far afield from what AI is going to do to us, so I should come back. But yeah, I have AI on the back burner of my brain all the time now, because my brain, philosophically, I think it's oh man, we have no idea what's coming. I don't know what our kids are going to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, it is advancing so fast. Like, there was a fake thing where Elon Musk, was saying he's giving away his Bitcoin, and just go to the site. It was a thing to get people's info to rob them. But they could, AI could make Elon Musk on video saying something he didn't say.
You can't know what's true and not true. And
Yeah.
the sad part is, people will only rely what they see online, because
Yeah.
no one will go. It just, we're living in a virtual world. Like, we will be living in a virtual world, and we ignore the people around us. People don't connect. Um,
You said something earlier. It sparked a thought I had recently. So it's very common now, and this is a question more mental health stuff. It's very common now to be able to talk about it.
Mm.
It isn't where, when we're kids, if somebody saw a therapist, it was a private thing. You didn't want anyone to know. Not that we did in my family because we were all poor, but you just didn't know about that. There's all these video stuff about why Gen X is we're the toughest generation, because our
Mm.
parents weren't home, show the playground equipment we were on. I mean,
Yeah,
it,
right.
it's humorous.
Spinning metal of death, right?
Yeah. It's humorous because we lived it and our kids have no idea. And those are the coolest toys and things too. But
Mm.
anyway, my wife said something the other day. I was like, well, sometimes you don't have a choice to be sad. If you got to feed your kids, you have to, pull up the bootstraps. And so that made me think, I was like, how much, because we've made it more acceptable. It's not a stigma that, oh, you have to see a therapist. Now that we've made that so easy for people, has it made for an excuse for some people that like, oh yeah, well, I'm Mena, so I don't have to go to work today.
Yeah,
And they're not taking care of themselves.
agree. Yeah. Oh man, how much time you got, Gino? And then, talk to me about the quality of the therapy that people are getting. You know, I'm
Yeah.
I'm doing some consulting and I'm helping a counseling service uh really bring better consistency and quality to the care of therapy that they're offering. So, not everyone gets to see a psychologist, and not every LMFT or MD, whether it's a psychiatrist, who they tend to be better at giving drugs than therapy because they spend, 5 years studying the body and then maybe a couple years looking at, how to talk to people. But anyway, regardless, PhD, but like different levels, you get different therapy. So are we even helping people in the same way? Are we relying too much on drugs uh, as mood stabilizers? Um, are we leading healthy enough lifestyles? Meaning, I agree. My philosophy, yeah, I have a lot of philosophies on how to manage mental health, how to take ownership of it. But yeah, I think we are. I think we have a lot more mental health issues at our doorstep caused by a lot of controllable reasons, and inside there are people with what I would call the more internally driven, significant, emotional mental health events that are happening that I think, and again, because we don't have community, the food we eat, the way we sleep or don't sleep, we've got this whole LED light problem that this world is going to have to deal with if ever it cares about us getting good sleep again. But LED light, reduces melatonin. So we're like, and I'm telling you, like, there is nothing you can do for yourself that's going to be better for your mental health than sleep. You know what I mean? Like you can die from poor sleep.
Right.
It'll kill you. So talk to me about mental health. It's like everything's connected to everything, right? And so yeah, we have people that quote unquote, you talk about, are they not trying hard enough, or are they weaker, are they not tougher? And absolutely, and that's one kind of a conversation to have. And then we look at, how can you help someone that's sleeping 5 hours a night and they're up playing video games till 2 in the morning, and they've got their circadian rhythm all thrown off, and they're drinking sodas all day and eating manufactured food
Red
and
Bulls.
Red Bulls and seed oils, and I mean, there's so much research, but those aren't sexy messages, and no one makes money telling you not to eat. Some people do, but it's not mainstream media to sell not doing something that's bad for you, right? It's hard. So anyways, it's a journey to really, I think, taking our survival into our own hands. People, and we talk, do people want to think about those things anymore? you know People want the easy button. Isn't that our staples? The
Well, I
easy
think we've
button
always
plan.
wanted the easy button, but we were willing to work harder for it. to get that easy button, you
That's
know?
interesting. I love that thought. Yeah. Say that again. We were willing to work harder for the easy button.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. We've talked a lot about, I think we've done more talking about who I am because I have this, although I think you're just as driven and stuff as me, if not more so, but I just don't have this understanding for things. And maybe that's the difference between us. You have an understanding of mental health and stuff, and I don't. When someone says they're sad or whatever, I don't
And
understand it. Just be
well,
happy.
yeah.
You know?
Well, and I love that dichotomy between us because I think that is um a wonderful point where you respond to things in such a like natural way. It's almost just such a beautiful kind of approach. Like, this is how this makes me feel. And it's like, yeah, right. Like that's how humans respond to things. So it's kind of fun to say, what do you see, Gino? And you're like, well, here's what I see. It's like, yeah, it's a pretty typical reaction. It's how a lot of people feel.
Yeah.
It's interesting. You talk very openly about your background growing up, growing up poor. And, I'm a generation off that. My father grew up very poor. And um, you know, I take that with pride in a sense that his stories growing up poor are so embedded in my childhood. Because in part, being poor allowed him, no, not didn't allow him, forced him to do things that seemed so interesting to me and my brother. We were like, Daddy, we want to be poor. We were little kids and he'd tell us stories,
Yeah.
driving places on the weekends. And I remember him laughing, the first kind of mirthful, bittersweet laugh I'd ever heard anyone laugh. And it took only years later, because that laugh just hung in my head, did I realize what he was laughing at, that the irony that, here he had given his children, the comfort that they'd never know hunger, never have to sell newspapers at 5 years old on a corner, etc.
Yeah.
But anyway, but his stories of, appreciating, we used to say, Daddy, what's your favorite dessert? And he'd say, oh, he said, well, when we had all three ingredients in the house at once, we used to love bread, butter, dipped in sugar. And I'll tell you, that's the best homemade donut. That's the best donut you're ever going to have. So, for me, that is my favorite dessert, is a thin slice of bread. And lo and behold, we went to Australia, where they call it fairy bread. You take a thin slice of white bread, you put butter on it about a quarter inch thick, and you dip it in hundreds and thousands, cut it in triangles, and serve it to kids. And it's the best birthday treat. But anyway, so for me, little stories like that, and to have watched where he got, and to watch where you've gotten, I love that. I love building something, growing from something. So I have such an additional respect, which is why, I do love working in what I call really grassroots industry, where people start very simple businesses just off the sweat of their back. And
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for that stuff. Give me ag, give me avionics, and anything where people had to like think about something from scratch. And
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
real.
It's fun. Like, well, my son, he's very entrepreneurial minded. And well, my daughter as well, who's, the musician. Well, she wants, she's not making a ton of money on the music right now. So my
Mm,
my son's like, here's how to make 2,000. Here's how, he just has all these ideas how she could be making money,
wow.
because it's so easy for him. He'll
He
never work
sees he
for
must
anybody.
see. I'm looking forward to catching up with him, but because I want to, I'm such a curious person about people, but he must see things in a whole different wavelength, understanding the business he started. He can see between things in a way that, like, I don't think our generation even knows what he's looking at, but he does.
Yeah, he's interesting. I mean, he does degrees in philosophy, which it's funny. Some people laugh at, and then other people are like, "That's brilliant."
Mm.
I mean, And I'm valuing it more too, because it's teaches you how to think, which is what
Yep.
I'm always about, is I want to think differently. Okay, you're thinking that. I never take anything as gospel. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, that's an interesting
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah.
What's the opposing thought?
Yes,
And
because philosophy, I mean, philosophy is about the think, if you want to think about it like in terms of like turn it into equations, it's like different ways of looking at the world through a
mhm,
different philosopher's eyes. They are thinking models, and they
yeah.
put people at odds sometimes.
Anyway, it's fun because I look at Creighton. I'm like, I'll never have to worry about him. He can take care. He knows he is capable of making happen whatever he needs or wants to happen,
Mm,
which
that's
we
good.
all have that in us, but we're raised to think you got to go get a job.
I
It,
like the idea that you can make a job. You
yeah. And
make
that's what
your
Creighton was
job.
saying. It's UCSB there, he said, yeah, I got my business. And other kids, oh, I get a business too. And he's like, and the other person's business is they're flipping sneakers or some little hobby they're making money on.
Hey,
And
but
Creighton,
still better than the kid just playing video games
yeah,
all day
true.
and delivering food.
But Creighton's like,
Yeah,
I don't
he's
want
really
a
building
boss.
something.
I want to be the boss. And
Mm,
people say, oh, you go work for all these great companies. And he goes, yeah, well, I want to be that great company that everybody wants to go
yeah,
work for.
yeah. And
You know,
it's interesting because how we talk to our children sets them up for that. There's that whole rich dad, poor dad. You're either gonna be the boss or you're gonna be the worker. You're gonna either, and I know Rich Dad, Poor Dad's a lot about passive income and a whole
right.
different ball of wax. But I remember realizing that a lot of parents, me included, at the start, just started thinking about, well, when you have a boss one day, and I was like, no, I'm not going to use that language at home. It's when you are the boss or when you're running your business, it isn't that
Yeah.
someone else would make you be responsible. It would be that the responsibility would naturally come out of you. And so that's how we spoke about the future. And we do speak about the future in our home is when you're running your business, you are going to want to think about that or XYZ. So, yeah. And I think we tend to, buy into this that, oh, everyone's going to have a boss. And I'm like, it doesn't have to be, especially in this world where people more than ever now, hey, you want to have a TV show on YouTube? Zero barriers to entry.
Right.
I mean, it's amazing. And yet, why don't more people do it? Why doesn't everybody have content going on there? How often does Instagram pop up and go, want to make a reel? Want to make a reel? They're hurting for content. The
Yeah.
internet is really hurting for content. Social media, but barrier of entries are all gone. But how do we help people? Because they don't have the boss mentality like we're talking about your son has, and the way you and I run our businesses. And I think that we got to help undo that for people where you don't need a boss, you are the boss, but be a good boss when you're going to be the boss. There's
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, what is it? The worst boss you'll ever work for is yourself.
Yeah.
Because if you're running a good business, you're never off duty. You never don't think about your work. And, you and I spend more time trying to help bosses do what's good for themselves and the business because they just kind of beat themselves up sometimes working too hard and don't
Right.
know how to take it easy. Anyways, so interesting. But it makes me feel good to hear that Creighton is really on his way. And he's an example of what we're hoping a lot of young people can become, which is independent and motivated and responsible.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm proud of him. He's not into things. He's into experiences. He's already traveled more than like, I think I've told you we're going to Europe, but I haven't been since 95. Creighton's been 4 times. It's like
I love
something's
that.
wrong here, but that's
You'll
what's,
catch up. We'll make sure you catch up
yeah,
there.
yeah. Well, I don't know. He's already got his next trip planned. So, um,
That's awesome.
but he mentioned something yesterday was neat too. And this is what I think's neat about this generation is he says, yeah, well, his girlfriend, him thinking when they travel, they want to do some volunteer in places they go. Like they're going to Hawaii. He's like, yeah, we'll spend a day picking up trash off the beach or,
Mm.
you know, there's teach English to some kids and forget what they were talking about, but I'm like, that's
Yeah.
that's an
Yeah.
awesome way to think.
When if there, you talk about picking up trash for a day, you don't need to organize anything. You don't need to
Yeah.
go call somebody. You just go pick up trash wherever you
Yeah.
go. And that's funny because when I walk Crystal Cove State Beach, and I pick up trash on the way up the beach so that I can enjoy the beach clean. Because every piece of trash I see is just like, ugh. So I do that too. And if we could help people feel how good it feels to be naturally good, they have no idea the drug that releases in your body, that, how good it feels to do good, whether
Yeah.
it's just something so simple, and you can do it everywhere. I was at yesterday I had a meeting at, down in Long Beach, and I was at the off ramp, and I thought, how easy would it be for the hotels? There's a bunch of trash just right at the gore point where you go to the off ramp to these beautiful hotels. And how hard would it be for each hotel to have a rotation where they just send one of their people, one of their sanitation people out there to kind of, mow it down, pick up the trash once a month, once a week. I don't know. But
Yeah.
how hard would it be to take pride in the community within a mile? If we all took care of the 1 mile around us, what could the world become if we could create just even a quarter mile, just like a quarter, be a quarter miler, just call it something fast and easy. But the world would be amazing. We could
Yeah.
transform communities overnight. And
You
this
know,
is,
here's a good example. So I used to attend this church when I lived up in Chico, and our pastor organized one week, we called it Love Chico. So instead of
mm,
a church service that Sunday, we all went out into the community and did projects. Well, it turned into a thing where like every church in Chico did this.
oh,
And it
yeah.
was awesome. The things that would get done in one day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It must have been amazing because even little things to me, I had an office that I kept for 5 years. I had a great office with a great partner. Uh, anyways, I'd walk into the front of the building every day to go to my office, and there'd be a U.S. Postal Service mailbox out front with a 1/4 inch thick dust on top of this, outside the highest rent you could pay. I mean, you could pay a mortgage for what I paid even just for my share of this office.
Right.
Yet every day, me, my clients, and everybody else are walking past this. Absolutely. So one day I come down with my Windex, some paper towels from the office, and I shined up that mailbox. And so many clients were like, "Hey, they finally cleaned that mailbox up." Like everybody somehow noticed that filth. And you're right, like that. So even little things like that, I just think,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, if we could like just, and there's a lot of people that do this, but that don't talk about it because, but
Right.
I agree, like this, love Chico. If you could just love home, love community, love something, it would be so powerful, but I don't think those messages are so sexy on social media. I don't know. Maybe we can make it that way. I don't know.
Yeah. I
But
don't know.
I know how good I feel after picking up all the trash on the beach.
Well,
I
and you and I get to benefit that in our jobs too, that helping people,
Yeah.
which a lot of jobs, they don't think they have that opportunity to get that, but they do. I mean, I've read stories about, the guy, the bag boy at the grocery store, leaving little notes in people's bags.
Mm.
And,
Oh,
um, what,
yeah, there is a
some
way to
guy,
make, yeah.
yeah, some guy walking, around, he would put, feed the meters if somebody's meter was running out, he'd put money in it so
I
they
love
wouldn't get
that.
tickets.
I
Just,
love that.
you know, uh, I don't
I
know.
know a
There's this
lady
little,
who I know a lady, she's in her 80s and she still runs, marathons, and she's just very active and one of those insanely powerful human spirits. She collects rocks and writes inspirational messages on them and just kind of leaves them in gardens, on hiking paths, and people find them, and it just makes her happy. It makes her happy. And yeah, I just doing good, is Yeah, it's just
Healthy.
people haven't figured it out. Very, very healthy, very healthy.
Yeah.
And you feed a bigger human spirit of the world. And I think humans need that connection for health and happiness. I call it, universal. It's so interesting. We talk about universal, the word, right? Universe, like the infinite universe. Like when we talk about something universal, people tend to think all over the world. Universal is a very big word, and we don't think how big all of that can be. That's where, like, I got to go back and read some of Deepak Chopra's books. He had a great interview with, is it Steve Bartlett, the DOAC podcast, Diary of a CEO podcast.
I don't know.
It was an amazing interview. And because Deepak is now in his 80s, and he
Mm.
says, I'm in the final phase of my life. I've given, I've created, and I mean, he's so accepting of where he's at in his life, and what a calming, wise voice. Yeah, no, Steve Bartlett interviews a lot of really great people, and he's a good interviewer too.
Mm.
As an interviewer, I don't cringe when I listen to him interview people as I do others when they're
Yeah.
not listening or just bored and want to move on to a different topic. Anyways, kudos to him, because being a good interviewer is not easy.
Right.
But anyways, yeah, so you're right. So many connections here. I know we've just kind of been all over the place.
Which is
But
about our norm.
yeah, I don't think it isn't I don't think we're any different this week than
Yeah.
any other week.
That's probably a good point to end.
I agree.
All right.
I
Well,
agree.
until next time.
You got it, Gino. Have a good one.
Thanks.